Welcome to Girl in the Gov, the podcast,
where our goal is to make politics more accessible and less intimidating.
The show features an interview with an expert in the political field, walking us through the many cues we have about politics, civics, government, and more.
By providing civic education in the places we are, on our phones, and in the language we speak. And yes, we know we say like a lot.
It's kind of the point, because politics needed a rebrand. Welcome back to Girl in the Gov, the podcast.
Welcome back. And I need to start this off with a scenario that just happened to me because one, it's a story. Two, I need everyone's help. And it's like light help. It's not like, nitty gritty, whatever. Okay. So everyone has always made fun of me for the way that I say arugula. Apparently I say, okay.
That reaction. Not correct.
That is okay. So I just went, which is very off brand for me. I'm not a sandwich girl, but I actually was like the one type of sandwich that I like is like an arugula, mozzarella, prosciutto, tomato.
Oh my God.
Like, oh,
ladies
hi,
here.
buddy. Oh God. Okay. Well, now my bad like little kid dog voice is going to be in this recording. So everyone, you're so welcome. I didn't realize how bad it was till we were doing a different recording, and then I overheard myself going, "Oh," and I was like, "Wow."
It's
really
not bad
Anyways.
compared to mine. Don't worry. But I will never expose that to the public.
Yeah.
I have
you're
secret
smarter
voices
with
that
it.
nobody can ever hear except Biggie.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Putting the dog stuff aside because we will go down the dog rabbit hole for hours.
Yeah.
So anyways, I'm in Vermont this week and I like go to like order the sandwich, whatever. And I'm like, it's one of the, like, they don't have it there. It's like an a la carte situation. So I was like, okay, like on that roll with arugula. And the guy looks at me like I have 10 heads. He's like, the what? And I'm like, arugula. And he's like, I don't even know what that is.
That's like an SNL skit.
But I like still like I can't say like I have tried, like my friends have said it like the way that I guess it's supposed. Excuse me. Okay, I've never heard that one either.
Arugula. How do your friends say it?
I don't know if I can do it. Like, wait, okay. So I say arugula. They say
They probably say arugula.
It's not as the U isn't as pronounced. It's more along those lines. But wait. How do you spell? Oh, there are two U's. I'm done. I'm absolutely done. But no, the second U is less pronounced than the way you say it. The way they do it.
Arugula?
I think it's more that. It's closer to that.
Arugula. Yeah, that's a lot of people say it like that, I guess.
I don't know what it is, but this one's just always been funny because my friends always make fun of me for the way I say it. And I'm like, oh, must have been like, because especially most of my best friends are tri-state area kids. I'm like, oh, this must have been like a Vermont thing. It must have been that. But here I am in Vermont saying arugula, and the guy thinks I have 10 heads. And I don't know if I can walk back into this shop again. It was something else. So that's story one. Okay. So and also I did tell my friend that we were shouting him out. So, you got to bring him up. You got to bring him up. Okay. So in the funniest DM slide that I think I've personally ever received, but also like kind of the best DM slide, one of my guy friends slid into my DMs at 2 a.m. on a Saturday. I was surprisingly asleep, which is unlike me. But anyways, I wake up nice and late. I actually slept in for once. And I have a DM slide from said guy friend with Maddie's video. It's one of our Girl in the Gov the podcast videos, actually one of our paid sponsorships too, all about voting and voting deadlines, etc. And he had sent me the video, and then the caption, he was like, "You're the reason."
You're the reason
I'm. Mm-hmm. Which we love to see, and we encourage and love. Right. If there is a DM slide that involves voting or human rights, like, look, you're definitely barking up the right tree. But this is where
the question is who? Who's making you turn out to vote? Is it Maddie in the video, or is it Samantha that you're sliding into the DMs at 2 a.m.?
Like, I have never lost. Like,
Samantha,
it's both. He's. What's the phrase where they like?
They're casting a wide net.
There it is. We got there. So I mean, it's So anyways, that cracked me up.
Speaking of boys voting, I was at a party this weekend, and it was a boy's house, and you know what a boy's house is like, you know, just
Is that the one
disgusting.
I cropped him from the picture?
Huh? I don't know who
artfully
that boy
cropped him out.
is. Nonetheless, I am going through the house, you know, it's a house party, so it's gross. There's cans everywhere. You know the smell. That's all I have to say.
Frat basement.
Yeah, you know it. And on the kitchen table, which is acting as beer pong table, of course, surrounded by cans of alcohol and probably some other mystery items, there's 3 voter guides. And in my head, I go, this is content. This is Girl on the Cuff content in the purest form. And the picture is just, I literally, so, you know, like go to my phone the next day as you do after a night out, look in your album, your photo album. And I see these pictures I took. There is a paper bag with oil on it. There's a couple beers, couple White Claws crushed up, a skateboard in the background. I'm just looking out. And then like the 3 big voter guides. And I was like, this is so cute. Just love to see it. Do I know that they're actually going to participate? No, but you know, everyone gets in the mail here. So I was just like, what a cute vibe. And then the next day I'm like, took these really disgusting pictures of a gross boy house party table.
That's actually iconic. Also, that picture did make it into a lovely little
and I was gonna say,
roundup.
it's such like a photo dump that, like, you know, like these days how people put like random photo dumps together that are just not aesthetically pleasing. Like it's one of those where it's just like a photo dump pic that's like ugly and just makes it in the photo dump. So go check it out. It's on our Instagram, and you can go see the said disgusting table with the voter guides because we just love to see it.
Oh,
I was giving
there's
pregame
something
in
else to it.
politics, and
Yeah.
it's just cool to see, you know, election season is just touching everybody, and here we are. And speaking of, don't let your friends miss elections. And
Bingo.
while you're at it, why don't you go get merch that says that? Because we dropped a collection with Social Goods that has a trucker hat, a tote, stickers, a pop socket that all say friends don't let friends miss elections, and you can go get it right now. So definitely go check it out and make a purchase before this big election so you can rock it when you go out to vote, or when you're honestly on your hot girl walk or whatever it is, and you can just spread that important message that friends don't let friends miss elections. We're also just gonna plug our giving circle because we are trying to raise money for underfunded progressive state legislature races so that we can protect human rights, women's rights, our democracy, and such. So go check it out. That'll be linked in the episode description. And if you can donate what you can, if you can send it to your friends and family and see if they can donate what they can, it's super, super important issue, and we want to, you know, do our part and contribute. So go check it out.
Amen to that. Sorry, I'm wearing my standing jeans with a shirt that does not go with the standing jeans. And
Not
I
the
just
standing
cannot
jeans.
get into a comfortable position, and it's just not it. Like the aesthetics on this video.
But yeah,
from,
everyone, you know, like when you're wearing your standing jeans at dinner and you have to like sit flat. Samantha's doing that right now.
that is literally
Like,
happening.
Her legs are straight. Her body is then like trying to be parallel with the legs. You know the vibe if you've ever been there. You know, wearing your going out jeans, but you have to go to dinner first and you can't sit. That's the vibe for Samantha right now, which is interesting because it's Tuesday. But nonetheless.
Oh my God, I'm dead. Okay, wait. So a few things though that we do want to touch on before we get into it, before we get into the sauce. So we also have a winter internship. So if you are at college, university, and you are taking a internship class and need to fulfill that credit, this internship is for you. Or if it's a class that has an internship component to it as well, same thing goes, need to be able to take school credit. So all the details on the internship can be found on our website in the little careers section. And just an important note, no cover letter, because cover letters are canceled. It's the only thing I'll ever cancel. So
yeah,
that's
just
the tea
email
on
us with a little snippet about
your
why
resume.
you want to be an intern.
Bada bing, bada boom.
Yes.
Why you want to be an intern. Also,
And
speaking of fun thing, our
go.
brand
Yeah,
our brand
I was gonna
ambassador
shout out the brand
program.
ambassador program myself.
You know
but
what you do
please go
actually?
ahead.
No, I honestly like you are more cohesive, a more cohesive describer. I can't use English. Any words.
I do just have like
Arugula.
a built-in script in my head at this point. Let me run through it real fast.
Okay.
If you're not looking for an internship and you want to get involved with Girl in the Gov and our brand and help build our brand and our mission, you can join our brand ambassador program. You can go to girlinthegov.com, go to our brand ambassador section, check out the program, see if it's for you, sign up at the link, and then we'll be setting up a call with you to meet you and get you into the program. There's no requirements. It's all volunteer based, and you can really make the program what you want it. If you want political networking opportunities, we have those. If you want a community of women that you can turn to and talk about politics with, we have that as well. If you want to, again, spread the brand message, put on social media, that's a piece of it as well. So there's something for everyone. Again, no requirements, just sign up. We want to build this community and we want you in it. So go check it out at girlinthegov.com. Whoa, that was pretty good.
Not bad. Wow. Okay,
Bingo.
Do we want to talk about Teen Vogue?
You guys, we were in Teen Vogue last week. It's fine.
I think it was the highlight of my life. Like, I genuinely think like we didn't peak because like there's so much more work to be done and so much more like
just the
to
start.
come. But like it's one
We're
of
gonna
those
be
moments like
invited to the Met Gala next year. Just be ready for that. That's usually what
would
comes
you
next, I think. So
yeah, it's a classic. It's hand in hand. I mean,
yeah.
Come on. Teen Vogue political feature meets Met Gala. I mean, I see a collaboration in the works. What are we wearing in the Met Gala?
Well, we'll have to see what the theme is, but
that's fair.
And see, what designers reach out. But yes,
okay.
that happened. We're super excited about
and-
it. We talked about voter registration. So go check it out. We'll link it in this episode description so you can read as well. But we were also on one of our favorite pods last week. It was just a week full of fun.
It really was. I was like, okay, look, here's the thing is anything in terms of podcasting, content creation, owning a business, politics, whatever, every day is a roller coaster. But last week's roller coaster was a great time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm sorry, but that was like, what is life? Like, pinch me, is this real?
Mm-hmm.
You were on Interesting with V Spear, which is one of our favorite podcasts. And if you are like, wait, it sounds familiar. Where's this podcast? Who is V? Under the Desk News, which also literally favorite content creator in the news sphere, which isn't even like content. Like, it's content creation meets being an anchor of a news show. Like, it's both.
It's incredible.
And we love V. V is amazing. The show is amazing.
We are absolutely beyond honored to be a guest on their show because Ricky Lake, I believe, is also coming on. Like, the guests they have slated are really impressive, and the fact that we're included is doesn't make sense.
Also, side note to that is V came on our show as well, and that episode will be out in a few weeks.
We will get into this episode. Give me one sec because one more thing. RSVP to a free event. We are actually co-hosting. We are talking with Flip the Vote to talk about how you can make your largest impact on these 2022 midterms and build people power for 2024. So we got asked to be co-hosts for that event, which is super exciting. You can go to the link in this episode description to RSVP to the event Eventbrite. If you don't know if you can go yet, or if you just RSVP, then you can just get notified when it happens so you can remember if you have time that day to come check it out, then just go RSVP. We'd love to have you. So there's that. And don't forget to listen to our Top Stories episode from yesterday. We talk about all the craziness that's just happening in the political world and how it's kind of bleeding into this election and how it's contributing to what voters think about this election. So there's that story. There's the teacher shortage story, which is so important. I'm super glad we got to highlight that because it's a very important topic right now. So make sure you go listen to that. And always. And Biden's marijuana pardon. We talk about that and also, how much more work there is to be done on that topic. So go listen to our top stories. And now we are super excited to introduce our guests, which are the hosts of Political Playlist, 2 of 3 hosts, may I say. So we had Anna and Anthony on from Political Playlist. Michael wasn't able to make it, but they are the trio behind Political Playlist, an incredible playlist that highlights young members of Congress.
Facts. Honestly,
Did
this
I say
conversation.
An incredible playlist?
Well, you did, but it's honestly
but that's
not even.
I guess an incredible podcast / playlist.
Well, okay,
I don't know what I said.
They do also
the
part of what they do is they create a playlist, like a newsletter playlist of news and stuff around young politicians, the ones under the ripe age of 45. There are only 75 of these politicians in Congress, which is wild. This could change with these midterm elections. We'll see where these numbers go. But either way, not too many out of the 535 members of Congress, right?
Baffling numbers there.
Anyways, without further ado, here's Political Playlist. We are so excited to have you guys here. We discovered y'all on the great old Instagram, naturally, and I could not have been more excited to find the Political Playlist. We have a whole demo of young voters. You guys are going after something very similar, and there's just so much synergy between Girl on the Gov and Political Playlist. But we want to get into the nitty-gritty, how you guys started, where it all began, and of course, obviously, hello, what is the Political Playlist? So maybe let's start with that. What do you guys do? What is it all about?
I can give the description, and then Anthony can tell our Political Playlist meet cute story.
Yeah, I'm always a good follow-up.
Yeah, so Political Playlist is an educational, nonpartisan political platform, and we inform voters about the 76 members of Congress who are under 45 years old. We record one video episode a week that is about 10 to 12 minutes long, and we release it on Instagram, on YouTube, and on a podcast. And we focus on an issue that is topical and pressing, and we discuss what some of these young leaders in Congress are doing about it. And our goal really is to educate people. Like I said, we're nonpartisan. We're not really advocating for one side or the other, but we think that it's important that no matter what your beliefs are, you know who these young politicians are, because they hold the keys to our governmental future. So
Totally.
So before we dive a bit more into our platform, we have a really funny story about how Anna and I first met. We were actually at a restaurant opening in Los Angeles, and we were sitting at a communal table. We did not know each other, and a girl fainted on our table. And
Stop it.
Wait,
yeah.
what?
And at first, I thought she was just trying to get our seats at the table because they were having a major issue. It was really bad.
Terrible service.
You know,
Yeah.
It was, and we were seated across from each other. So of course, you just start talking. You're looking at
Because
someone.
there's like a girl laying on our table.
Oh
basically.
my God. Wait.
I think her friend was like, she took Xanax or something like
Yeah,
that. Like it was
classic LA.
weird.
Classic LA moment.
It was
Yeah.
a very weird situation.
But anyways, Anna and I started talking, and we realized we had a lot of mutual friends. One of my close friends went to school with her. Then we also both attended USC. And then as
I
we
went
got
to
to
UCLA first though, so
yeah, we don't like to tell people
Here.
that, you
Go
know. so-
Lions. I'm an
I'll sweep it
LMU
under
girl.
the rug.
Yeah, we'll sweep that one under the rug.
ugh, go Bruins.
But we both started talking about politics and how we both grew up in political households in terms of our parents were involved. And we felt like we were that friend in each friend group who was always the one people would come to and
Yeah.
say, hey, who do I vote for? I don't know what I should do.
Mm-hmm.
And we had
Totally.
been creating these lists for friends. And we wanted to do something a bit more than, you know, going out in the field, knocking on doors, volunteering, throwing fundraisers. And while all of that is great, we really wanted to focus on young politicians.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where the light bulb came on for us is when we looked at the numbers, the fact that only 14% of our Congress is under the age of 45, just like confused us, honestly.
Yeah.
Confusing,
we-
but also completely expected, I
Right.
guess.
I know. We
yeah,
always,
you would expect it to be a lot more, right?
right. And then you look at, you know, we were talking about how this week, you know, the Senate is back in session, and we have Senator Leahy out with a hip replacement. We got Schumer out. So it's
Feinstein
like, us
having
all the
nap
grandmas and
time,
grandpas
you
we
know.
got to, you know,
Yeah.
be careful with. But why specifically like this goal of highlighting these, you know, these electeds that are younger? What do you hope to achieve by doing that?
I think the goal really is to expose people to the individuals who in some cases already are, but for the most part will be the leaders of our parties in the future. I think that we've seen that a lot of leaders stay in leadership positions for a really long time. And so we should make sure that they're who we want in those positions. And I think a lot of people are very unhappy with the leaders of our parties right now. And the reality is that these young politicians, you know, like Anthony said, there's only 14% of the entire Congress is under 45. the average age of an American right now is 37 or 38. So you figure like most voters in America are under the age of 45. Most voters in America are actually under the age of 40, but we can kind of get to that discrepancy that we chose later. But the reality is that these young leaders, even if you don't agree with them, they share a generational experience with you as a young voter. And as you guys know, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, young people don't vote. And one of the biggest reasons they don't vote is they don't feel like inspired. We don't feel like emotionally connected to the politicians, which, you know, I think our parents' generation and beyond that didn't feel the need for like an emotional connection to their politicians. I think voting was a more pragmatic thing, and it's become a very obviously emotional experience for Americans. And what we notice, even in the ones that we personally disagree with about these young politicians, is that there is kind of this ability to feel connected to them because they talk like us, they understand the digital space like us, they in many respects care about the same issues as we do, even if our views on them slightly differ or our kind of approaches to solving them slightly differ. And so I think our goal in all of this is to show voters, but especially young voters, that there are people in Congress who might look like you, talk like you, have shared life experiences with you, and they could eventually have a lot of power. So if you like them and know about them, you can follow their career and advocate for them.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Awesome.
Well, I do want to talk about the 45 situation because, like, look, I'm not trying to be ageist here. Someone's going to call me out. I just know it. But
We've been called out so many times.
Yeah, 45 is old.
Yeah.
I feel like there's certain call outs where it's like you just know it's going to happen. I'm almost like tempted to just like start like a little, I don't know, not a roadmap, like a tally. Just be like, okay, take a shot for every time it happens. And I mean, then we'll just be blackout.
There's worse things in the world. Yeah.
Sounds fun, honestly.
Yeah, it sounds
right.
like a good
This
time.
is the new party trick. It's going to be great.
Yeah, well, the reason we ended up picking the 45 age, not because I look 45, but more because when we looked at the politicians,
Anthony's so funny, by the way. He says so many funny jokes.
It's because when we looked at politicians under the age of 35, it was a very, very small number.
I think it's like 2 or 3% of Congress.
Yeah, a little less than 3%. So we figured we were going to start a platform with a very small amount of politicians on there, and that would just get a little repetitious. So we widened that scope, but most of the politicians are actually between the ages of I would say larger demographic is between the ages of 45 and 60. And then above that is the second largest majority. Yeah.
It's basically baby boomers, and mainly baby boomers, but baby boomers and Gen X have control of Congress. Currently.
I was going to ask, like, what is that generation? Because I feel like I always skip like millennials. I go from millennials to boomers. But I know there's
so Gen X is like
so.
Gen X is like the people born in sort of late 60s to 70s, and I think millennial starts in 83. And the interesting thing, sort of population wise, is that there was the baby boomers. Obviously, there's a lot of them, hence the name of their generation. And then millennials we're not as populous in numbers as the baby boomers were when they were our age, but we are much more populous than Gen X because I guess, you know, it was like free love and stuff, but there weren't babies being born. No, it honestly, I don't know what it was. It was like women started working, and so less babies were born. And so the Gen X as a generation is just not as large as the baby boomers. So in political terms, the boomers still have control.
The
boomers definitely
and we can feel it. We can feel them. Their control.
Yeah, we feel the boomers, right? We feel the boomers all around us.
Well, you know, just kind of going back to one of the questions you just asked about, you know, why we wanted to focus on younger politicians. It's really, as Anna mentioned, a lot of the issues that young people care about, the climate, right? Student debt. There is a very similar idea between both Republicans and Democrats on that. The most dividing is obviously abortion, and we've just seen that recently in Supreme Court ruling and how our young politicians actually talked about it. But that was one thing that really resonated with us. You know, when you look at some of the Republicans over the age of 60, I think it's like 70% of them don't believe in climate change.
Or they say they don't.
Yeah. And, you know, that's just frightening.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas
Yeah.
most of the young Republicans, I would venture to say all of the young Republicans acknowledge that climate change is happening, acknowledge that there is stuff to be done on the environment. Their solutions differ from Democrats. You know, we just saw the Supreme Court ruling on the EPA. That's a really good example of how Republicans and Democrats view the solution different around climate change. Republicans want it to go to state and private industries to set all of these regulations and standards, whereas Democrats want it to be more on a federal level. But we're kind of moving past the time when people were saying that climate change was a hoax or like invented by the Chinese or whatever those lines of lies were.
For sure. You guys might have touched on this, but what is the average age of a member of Congress? And then also of the younger members, like where are they typically leaning? Do you guys have answers for those?
Yeah. So the average age of a member of Congress is about 58 in the House. And then in the Senate, it's 63, around that age. So it's
young
old.
and spicy.
Young and spicy is right.
It is solidly boomer, as we were just discussing.
Solidly boomer.
But the
That's
interesting thing to note in terms of the split, but you're asking about the split between Republicans and Democrats, right?
Amongst the younger
People. Yeah. So it's really interesting. So when we started Political Plays in 2020, there were 38 Democrats and 23 Republicans. So there was 61 in total people under 45, and Democrats definitely had a leg up on Republicans. That a lot of that was attributed to people being elected in 2018 and the sort of blue wave, again, you know, in retaliation or reaction to Trump.
Yeah.
Then in 2020, even though Democrats, you know, won back control, won the White House, we now have 76 leaders in Congress who are under 45 years old, which is great. It's an even split 38-38. So Democrats actually have the same number. Republicans really gained. And we've talked to people about this, and we actually talked to a Republican strategist about this issue specifically. And what he was saying is that Republicans are, Anthony likes to say this, and this is, he's the business person, so I'm just going to make myself sound businessy by saying it. Like, Republicans are vertically integrated. So they really look to their own, figure out in a systematic way who they want to bring up within their party. And especially I think that this guy, Eric, the strategist we talked to, who's talking specifically about Florida, does this a lot. So we have so many young politicians who are from Florida. They do a really good job, especially in the Republican Party, of looking at their state legislature, looking at their state Senate, looking at their local governments, and pulling people up into usually some of these like safe Republican seats and getting people slotted in there who can then take over. So it's just something to know about, you know, if you're a Democrat, like, and you say, oh, Democrats' messaging is off, blah, blah, blah. I agree with that. But there's also like a systematic element of the Democratic Party that does not look to its own to, I guess, promote from within.
Democrats actually have control the older generation in Congress. So they actually, so they actually make up the oldest population. And, you know, back to this whole vertically integrated, this is where Republicans are very good. They have a message and it just gets, you know, brought down, strategy, and everyone follows it. I always like to joke that the Democratic Party is like a Jackson Pollock painting. There's a lot of different issues that they're figuring out. And then there's 50 organizations that are fighting for the same thing. So it's hard to break through that noise. And that's where I think the Democrats lose their strategy.
Right. God, it's so true.
You're definitely not going to get an argument from us on that.
Yeah, no. Like, and you'll just get like long tangents and rants.
And the reality is, like, you're not going to see as much Democratic promotion from within, which, like, look, there is a flip side to that, which is you look at, if you're a progressive Democrat, that might not actually help the progressive movement, because those progressives are usually challengers to incumbent Democrats. And then they come in with their new ideas and are able to unseat sort of these people, Democrats who have been in Congress for a long time. But I think that from our perspective, in just focusing on sort of people of a younger age representing young Americans, the Republicans do a much, much better job of that. And, you know, we'll see what happens this year. I mean, obviously, people are expecting that Republicans will have some sort of victory. However big that victory is remains to be seen. But it will be interesting to see how it plays out in terms of new faces coming in on both sides. But I think especially on the Republican side, if you'll see a lot of new Republicans coming in some of these swing districts, especially.
Yeah. And I have a question too in terms of just the younger demographic and the Republicans being a little bit more organized on that end. Do you think it's also like their media sources? Like, for them, like it's, and them, I'm making it sound like so the other, but it kind of is, two like liberal bitches over here. But like, do you think it's like Turning Point Media? Like, do you think it's like some of these other talk shows that are just so like also integrated with their platform? They're all just feel really united, and there's something more to that in terms of recruiting young people, or like, do you think it's strictly within the party?
I absolutely think it is. I mean, Turning Point is a huge organization on the Republican side. Then I've always joked with friends from on the Democratic side. I'm like, how is there not a massive billionaire who's doing what the Koch brothers are doing?
Right.
If they want to fund us, let us know.
That's right. We're actually looking for an investor.
Where are you?
Like, because they do 2 events a year. They have the elite of the Republican Party involved in it, and the echelon of the 1%ers involved in who are on the Republican side. And then they fund all of these organizations through different companies and whatnot. But I was like, on the Democratic side, the only thing I hear about is certain things at politicians' homes, not from the other people, not from citizens, which always surprises me.
I think though, to the question about like how much their media sources have to play into it, I feel like, I mean, Turning Point's an interesting example because it's very Trump aligned, and it was very much born out of that brand of Republicanism. But I would venture to kind of go back a little bit more, like bringing up the Koch brothers. I feel like there has been a decades long effort, people have been talking about it a lot in terms of the courts and all of that, but there's also been a decades long effort in the conservative movement to find who the new leaders are going to be. And like there are people who, I mean, I know it happens with Democrats too, but I've just heard of it happening way more with Republicans. There are people who are handpicked. A lot of the times they're veterans, or they have sort of similar stories like that. They're asked to move to new places to run in those districts. Look, I'm not saying that doesn't happen on the Democratic side, because it absolutely does. But I think that what happens on the Republican side is that there is a real system in place, both which is good and bad, right? Like, we don't want to think our politics is that manufactured, but the reality is that it is. And we like to think that everyone just kind of is like AOC and is a bartender who runs for Congress, but that, that's kind of like a pipe dream most of the time. But I think that, if people are out there and they're wondering if I'm a Democrat, how can I find my place or find these people? It's like, get involved in your local organizations, like find your local Democratic Party chapter, because those are the people that are going to endorse the races. Right. And those are the people that are going to be finding the talent. And the reality is just the Republicans have done a much better job of finding new talent for a really long time.
Yeah, we were just talking about this. The long game in general, like the Republicans have just really mastered, and like the Democrats are really all over the place, and I feel like lack that strategy and organization. But to also kind of look,
well, you guys, you girls are going to change that, right?
Yeah,
working on it bit by bit, day by day.
Obviously,
yeah, we're expecting you to.
Yeah, we're rebranding it for them. They just need to come knocking on our door. We're ready.
Wait, no, they did, and then we sent them packing.
Yeah,
so there was that.
Actually, that's true. I did have a question too about like leadership in the House, and honestly not even in the House, but just all over the place. Do you see a trend in like the way Republicans, I guess, bring young leaders into leadership roles in the House and the Senate versus Democrats? Like, I don't know, just even looking at, Nancy Pelosi and how she's just like the reigning Speaker of the House. Like, is there
she's
any,
the prom queen.
Yeah, is there any like trends that you see kind of on the Republican side that they do actually put kind of younger, fresh blood into leadership positions?
Yeah,
over Democrats?
Great question, actually. First, I gotta say, like, Nancy Pelosi really is a queen, though. I mean, she knows how to get things done for the Democrats. It's just, but on the Democratic side, it's all people, I think, over the age of 80, except one of them. And the Republicans did, I think, a really smart move. They brought in Elise Stefanik from New York, who's on our platform. She's in the third position in the House leadership. And actually, all of their leaders are under the age of, I think, 55. Yeah.
And the Democrats
So they have
they have a
much-
term limit, I
80. Is
think.
that what you said?
Sorry, what was
That
that?
might be hyperbolic. I don't know that they're all over the age of 80 in
Or
Democratic
like
leadership.
average is 80?
So no, it's Nancy
Pelosi,
Pelosi,
Schumer.
Well, Schumer's in the Senate. There's Jim Clyburn, who's the whip, and then Steny Hoyer. And
Also old.
they're all, yeah. I mean, I
we-
used to be a congressional page, and all of those were there when I was 15 years old.
The one young Democrat who is in House leadership is Pete Aguilar, who is from Southern California. He is the number 6 in the House for Democrats. So like, he's still leadership, but they don't give out a medal for 6th place. So
Sure.
Well, for millennials, they do, right?
yeah, you got to participate.
Everyone gets a medal.
You get a oh my God, I can't even speak. A participation trophy on a podcast. So that
Yeah,
feels
exactly.
We'll give
Perfect.
you one, you give us one.
Yeah.
Perfect.
100%.
But wait, that is actually crazy that is like the age difference situation on either side. Does that have anything to do with the fact that like Republicans have a term limit issue, or not issue, but like situation going on with their leadership roles? Because I know that there was some talk about that a while back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They have a term limit in their leadership roles in the House. The Democrats do
That's
not.
what it is. Okay.
Yeah. So it's and as Anna mentioned, there's certain states like Florida who really promote these younger politicians. And what we saw in the last election cycle was there were a lot of older Republicans. You heard that crazy number of the amount of people retiring. Those were all won by young politicians.
Well, and the
So-
important caveat to that is that those were all people who were in safely red districts. So like you guys have talked about this a bunch before, but when you look at how gerrymandered our country is becoming, frankly, in both directions. I mean, you see what just happened in New York. Like the Democrats were really trying to like sneak in there and pull a Republican. and I think that what you see, gerrymandering aside, what you see happening is that districts are becoming more solidly red or more solidly blue. So we have less swing districts than we've ever had before. And so what the Republicans have done in their way of kind of taking advantage of that is that they, people in those districts retire knowing that a young new Republican who can kind of energize the party will win that seat. And what happens on the Democratic side is that they just don't fucking leave. So, but what does happen, especially now in this crazy political climate we have, is that Democrats who represent swing districts are leaving more because there's just such an amount of like violence, sort of oppression against these people. Stephanie Murphy from Florida, who's sitting on the January 6th committee, is a great example. She's a moderate Democrat. I think she's great. She has an amazing story. She's a refugee from Vietnam since she was a kid. She was the head of something called the Blue Dog Coalition in Congress, which is a group of moderate Democrats who really seeks to work sort of across the aisle, especially on fiscal issues. And she's retiring, and she cited basically like everything's just really too crazy and I want to be with my family. And she was getting threats and all
She's
this
going to
stuff.
vote for, she was going to run for Senate in Florida and decided not to.
Yeah. But so
Yeah.
it's there. I think that there's a lot in the swing districts right now that, we just see such an intense pressure on these moderate Democrats from within their own party and obviously from Republicans that people are just like tapping out.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, getting back to kind of what you guys do and highlighting these younger members, can you also explain kind of why we don't hear from them as much, like, or why we don't hear about them as much? Like, do they need a PR like refresh? Like, what's going on there? Why don't we know more about these younger members?
Yeah, it's kind of sad because when Trump was being impeached, there were about 4 members on our platform who voted to impeach Trump, and
Who are Republicans.
all of the news sources got it wrong. They had no idea where these people were from. And it was just quite surprising because I think there's probably a little bit more turnover for the younger generation. But in terms of social or using technology, they're much better at it. I think the issue comes down to money. Most young politicians are hindered from even running because it's too expensive. And unless they have someone funding their campaign to the fullest, the average is about $1.5 million on the low end
for the house.
For the house. You can see some people spending as much as 10 million to run in the house. So it's a really tough hurdle for these young politicians to get over because most of them are also coming off of student debt. So unless they have a big financing group behind them, it's very hard for them to make it even past the primaries.
I also think to that point, when you were talking about, why we don't hear from them, I think that there's been so much discussion recently about our news and especially cable news. And the reality is that, you're not seeing a lot of these young people on prime time. You'll see them on like Sunday at 11 on MSNBC or whatever, but they're not the ones that are necessarily getting that spotlight. And we all know all too well that a lot of sort of politician popularity is generated by cable news still. Maybe not amongst people our age, but I think in terms of like sort of cultural relevancy, that's still a really, really big hurdle that young politicians have to get through news producers is really another hurdle, I think.
Totally. And I feel like it's kind of one of those things where like, yeah, we're not tuning into like CNN or MSNBC 24 hours a day, but like we are then seeing the clips on IG and on TikTok, and like it still matters that the person was on a very like valid news source, and then that's like repurposed elsewhere. So it's like when people are like, oh, cable news is dead, I'm like, I don't disagree in certain ways, but I'm also like, yeah, but like that is the step one before it gets to social media. So
that's
like,
such a good point. Yeah.
And to your point,
So
Sam,
relevant.
like when something big happens in the world, we might get it from social media, but then we immediately go to a cable news source and turn it on to get a fuller story.
Yeah.
And, we've seen that happen over the last couple of years with, I hate cable TV. So
Yeah, I mean, it's also true how like we have this issue of, reaching out to certain electeds, and we can feel that like this crowd that we have and this young listener base that we have isn't really a priority for some of these representatives, because we aren't CNN and we aren't MSNBC, and those are just like the status quo, what they're used to for their media opportunities, when really like they should be branching out into these younger
and the
crowds.
reality is like that's strategy, right? Like I think that that's something that maybe we'll see a sea change in, is like, okay, well, if we want to get some of these younger voices, look, there are young voices who obviously have resonated on both sides of the aisle and resonated in a way that everyone's trying to figure out how to do that. And maybe that's a strategy shift that we'll start to see, is like, okay, what if it's not all about cable news? And what if we proliferate a lot of, whether it's podcasts or YouTube or whatever, it's interesting to bring that up, because I wonder if that's maybe where things are headed to get these people out there more.
Totally.
Yeah. I would just, one more point to this is a lot of the staffers are actually very young. Chief of staffs might be older, but a lot of their staff is young. So I'm actually surprised if, I was in politics, I'd be like, let's do all these small shows. Someone's going to hear it. And I think in this world, if you can influence, one person, fantastic. If it's more than that, amazing. And, I think that's what even keeps, us going. And I'm sure you as well.
Totally.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's one of those things where there's like the variety pack. You have certain staffers, they're so gung-ho. Like they are absolutely, they get it. And then there's others where it just seems like it doesn't, like they're gatekeeping, but it's more than that. Like they've lost sight of the end goal themselves too. Like they have been in it, even if it's only been like 2 years, 3 years since college, whatever, they really have like lost the sparkle for change.
For, like political
and
power
like
grab
I've had
and the clout, they get kind of caught up in it, I feel like.
Totally.
Yeah, totally.
And like both of us had
Power.
so many conversations where like they are people our age and they work in politics and they genuinely do not believe in the youth vote. They're like, it's a loss, it's whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
It's giving up.
you know, It's definitely a weird one. But I have another question, and it's definitely like I'm just curious what everyone's answer is. But okay, we think about like the boomers. They stayed in jobs for literally their whole lives. That was a classic thing. Like, you're going to work for one spot, you're going to vacation at the same place every year, eat the same damn meal every week. Like, boring, boring, boring. But hey, whatever, it was a thing. With millennials, we change jobs like every 5 seconds. And I feel like with like politicians, it's the same thing. You know, they always stick to the same job. They never leave. It's like, move on, do something different, retire, maybe play golf. I don't know. But like, do you think there'll be a change with, Gen Z or millennial politicians where they run and then they actually decide, hey, I'm in office for 2 terms and I've done my work here, on to the next thing? Or do you think they're just going to like take on the
That's an
boomer
interesting theory.
work mentality?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I will say that there are several young politicians who are in favor of term limits, or if not term limits, then some sort of legislation surrounding something like term limits. I think that, look, I can't speak for Gen Z. I don't understand Gen Z, like, man. But I think that we're seeing this change where people who start in politics maybe stay in politics, but my guess is that they move around. Like, I would be curious. There's politicians that we cover, by the way, who have had who have run at 38 years old and had incredibly interesting lives in the 15 years prior that have brought them to Congress to do something very specific. Like, the one that comes to mind is Lauren Underwood, who maybe you guys have talked about before. Like, she was a nurse, then she worked for Obama in healthcare policy, and now she's basically like running the show when it comes to especially maternal health and minority women's health. We talked to Sarah Jacobs, who is
Love her.
Who's a young
That's
Democrat from San Diego. And she said something that was really interesting. She ran for Congress and lost, and then she ran again and won. And she said this thing that has really like always stuck with me, that I think is so applicable to everyone and kind of, I think, answers your question, which is that for her, it was never about the job. It was about the goal and the thing she was trying to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that we will see that more with young people. I think that young people are very issue driven.
Yeah.
I think that they, like, let's talk about Gen Z, maybe gun violence, right, is a good issue to focus on. They might be like, my goal in life is to figure out the gun crisis in America. I'm going to do this one thing. I'm going to work for an advocacy organization. Then I'm going to go to Congress, see if I can pass gun legislation. Then if that's not, that their sort of like reason for being leads them to politics, but then maybe takes them elsewhere. But if they're effective in that sort of venue, then maybe they stay. But I think that's such a good way to think about it, especially with young people. It's about what's the mission, not the career.
Totally. Yeah. I will say though, like, even on the flip side of that, and something that I worry about with our generation is just like our short attention span and how we keep talking about this long game situation, and how a lot of people our age get frustrated with politics because they don't see the immediate change that they want. But just the way that our system is set up is that it takes a really long time to achieve the things you want and the change you want. And so I just worry about that too with our generation, especially we're seeing it now with just like Roe being overturned, to also gun control and mass shootings still happening. But it's like, it's going to take a while, unfortunately. Just like the, organizing around reversing Roe has taken decades. Like, it's just unfortunately how this
and
system
especially
is
on
set up.
Issues like healthcare, and especially like education. The issues that ultimately I think will alter our country,
climate change,
are issues that you can't solve in one administration.
Yeah, absolutely.
The sad part was when we looked at a lot of politicians, especially young ones, and we talked to them. Education is just not an issue to get people excited about. It's literally number like 10 on their list of things to talk about. And I was like, that's so sad, because education could probably help a lot of the
Change
issues in our.
everything.
It's like,
Yes.
yeah, it's like the trunk of the tree.
Building
and like,
block.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You
it's
just have
something you
leaves.
have to like wait generations for to see the fruit come from. So it's just,
Wow, I love this metaphor.
I'm not a metaphor girl and I don't know where that came from.
That was good. It really worked.
Thank you. I'm actually
Because
really
it's
proud
so
of it.
hot. It's
We
so
just need to
hot.
figure out what the roots are. If education's the
Ooh.
trunk.
Yeah,
There's
I
something
actually,
beneath
when
that.
I was on the campaign, we actually used a tree analogy to like to teach our volunteers, and it was interesting. I don't know if it would have worked for me.
Maybe that's where
but
it came from.
That's where it came from, I think, for sure. Well, to wrap it up and get like some kind of like superlatives of some of the young members you guys have highlighted, can we start it off and get who you guys think is like the number one politician to watch right now? Like who would you pick?
So I think there's two from Colorado who I think are going to be pretty big. One's Joe Naduse and one's Jason Crow. They're pretty like middle of the road, but one fighting for the environment, one fighting for gun legislation. So I see them being very, having a strong political career on the Democratic side. My Republican one, I think, is going to be, I just love this guy. His name's Dusty Johnson. He's just kind of like a total nerd, but he's very likable. And I think he's
From South Dakota.
yeah, he's from South Dakota, so he's the only representative from there.
Yeah.
But I think both of them are like a little bit middle of the road to keep their seats as well. And, unfortunately, the middle of the road politicians are the ones who are actually losing out mostly,
Yeah.
which is scary.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
Yeah. So I'm going to pick two Democrats too, to kind of illustrate what Anthony just said. One of them is Abigail Spamberger, who is potentially going to lose her seat this year. We'll see.
it's a tough.
But
tough
I think that
district.
I feel like if you're a Democrat or if you're a Republican, you should know who she is, because I find she has a really interesting background working in national security. I feel like she probably out of any Democrat on our platform is the most open to working with Republicans, trying to kind of bridge that gap. And because of that, she, it is a swing district that she represents, which is why that's her, her way of politicking. So we'll see what happens. But of people who I think have a lot of longevity, I'll just go back to Sarah Jacobs from Southern California. I think that she is super impressive. I feel like I don't know, maybe just as like a millennial woman, I think she's like 2 years older than me. I find
she's one of the few millennial women.
Yeah,
there
I
to
just find
herself.
her to be incredibly eloquent, but also really relatable. And, I think she had, if you're a pro-choice woman, she had a lot of really great things that she was saying about the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And then on the Republican side, I would point people to Tony Gonzalez from Texas. He actually represents the district that the Uvalde shooting was in. Before that, he's really focused on border security. And the reason that I would direct people to him, especially actually if you're a Democrat, is I think that, George Bush said he was going to solve immigration. Obviously that didn't happen. And I think that that's one of these issues that will continue to divide us until we can find some sort of legislative solution. And I find that Tony is a really interesting, I wouldn't call him a moderate Republican, but I feel like the way that he talks about border security is incredibly easy to understand and doesn't feel like it's coming from a place that's overly heated. It's coming from his experience representing that district and being on the ground in that district and representing a lot of immigrants from south of the border. And so I feel like if immigration is something you care about, he's definitely a politician to know about. And I think that he'll gain a lot more notoriety. He already has gained a little bit, unfortunately, because of the shooting, but I think that he will continue to do so.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting. We got a
Good
good
to
mix
know.
there. And like a little state variety. I mean, South Dakota does not get a lot of play on this show. So
wasn't
I'm glad
planned.
they're having their moment.
top 5 places to visit for sure.
Really?
Group trip?
Yeah, group trip.
Group
Group trip? Oh, that'd be fun.
All right. Fine.
Okay, on the opposite end though, who do you guys think is going to call it quits at some point in the near future? Like they've had their little moment, or maybe they haven't really had a moment, but they're somehow in the political elected scene and it's just not a fit. HR is going to give them a pink slip.
I mean,
Madison
I
Cawthorn.
hope it's Lauren Boebert. I just feel like, I've talked to Republicans. I just don't even think that that's like like a party issue. I just find that,
Crazy.
I think that she to me represents kind of like the epitome of the flash in the pan that we're in right now. And I feel like, look, I think there are Democrats that I could maybe also point to in that. And I think, I don't know, I just feel like people who come in with kind of like a real activist agenda on either side, there's a need to turn that into legislative action that has longevity. And I find her to be particularly kind of riding the coattails of Trumpism, which, isn't going away right now, but I think we will kind of see the right evolve in some way over the next maybe 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Julia Letlow. So she's actually from Louisiana, and her husband died from COVID actually before he took office. So I could she has 2 young kids. I could just see her realizing that this might not be the world that she wants to be in.
Yeah.
But it is a pretty safe seat for her. So we haven't seen too much come out of her, in terms of legislation and whatnot. So I could just see that being more of a family decision.
Fair.
You know what that just made me really want to do is interview every divorced couple where like they were in office married together and then they got a divorce and then find out the real tea. Like, were you in it? Did you just say yes? Were you supporting their dreams? Or like, did you secretly want to run for office and both of you guys like want to be peacocks and there's only room for one? Like
the majority have to hate each other or like,
well, what's so interesting about that, just to kind of talk about the generational thing, I feel like what is also cool about young people in office right now is they don't have to be married. Even when 30-something-year-olds were running 20, 30 years ago, especially women, like they had to be married. They had to have a spouse. And I think that's a generational thing that makes me happy because it's like, and you have people who are divorced, you have people who aren't married who are older, whatever. I'm glad that we're kind of beyond that requirement.
If you haven't watched the TV
Agreed.
show yet, First Lady is on Showtime.
Oh
yeah.
And fantastic recommendation. And it highlights the women who really made the sacrifices for their husbands to be in politics. And it's a sacrifice. Let's just
totally.
say that.
Oh my God.
So.
And the kids, can't imagine having
Yeah.
a parent in that role. That would drive me crazy. But to wrap up, where can people find you guys? Where can people get involved and jump
get
on
their own
into what you guys
playlist?
do? Yeah, all the things.
Yeah. So you can go to politicalplaylist.com and you can sign up for our newsletter and find our YouTube and podcast there. Our podcast is called Political Playlist Happy Hour. We're available on all podcast outlets. And we also post a video version on YouTube if YouTube is your thing. And then we are on Instagram at Political Playlist. Did I miss anything, Anthony?
No, you got it. Crushed it.
All the places.
And our happy hour, we drink when we talk
we love it.
about politics.
Yeah. So maybe we can do another one of these while
I
we're
was going to
drinking,
say
so.
our
Maybe
very
in
first
person would be
episode
more
we
fun.
ever did, we had drinks with us with our guest and it was
And
the
did
best
not
thing
go
ever.
well?
No, it was great, but like we literally have never done it since and I don't know why. Sam?
Yeah, it's, we kind of, I feel like we kind of just got in a rhythm of it. And I guess I should have said this in the description that we're called Political Playlist Happy Hour because we drink, even though it's not an hour, it's 10 minutes. It's Political Playlist 10-minute hour.
Yeah.
Happy 10 minutes. But
Anna has the lowest tolerance. So
definitely.
She
I mean, I would kind of hope so. Wouldn't that be embarrassing
there
for you
is
guys?
literally no competition. I don't drink very much. And so like the one drink I'll usually have during the week is to record our episode.
Mhm.
And I feel like I'm like red in the face.
Little
Michael is going
flushed.
through like 3 beverages in the recording time. And he has this
What do
like
you each
fancy
drink?
cocktail situation. I'm super boring. I'm not good at making drinks. I usually have like a glass of wine. Anthony always has a
I
martini.
would do wine too. A martini?
I always do a
And
version
Michael
of a
always
martini.
has some like incredibly ornate cocktail that he's invented on a weekly basis.
I mean,
No.
that's a fun thing to incorporate into your routine.
Yeah.
I'm team wine with you though. I
Yeah.
cannot make a drink to save
I can't
my
really
life.
make good cocktails either, but
No,
One thing I learned during the pandemic.
yeah, that's a good skill.
that's the only thing
Excellent.
actually.
Only
that you
thing.
learn.
The only thing. Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. This was a very interesting conversation. So thank you.
Thank you so much
for having us. Appreciate everything you guys are doing too.
Likewise.